another episode with Projects with Petro. This one's going to be a little bit different. We're getting away from the boats for a little while. What we're here is our basement playroom. This has served us many uses. Still got the old style 70s paneling, but we use it quite a bit, and I think other people do. I'm going to try to be a little bit more detailed on this one because I have a feeling that there's going to be a little bit broader interest on this project. So we'll get started. I'll describe the tools that we've got going and what I think it's going to take this job. I've never done this before, but we'll see how we do, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. Okay, this is your classic basement floor. I am not a fan of finished basements because they always leak. I don't care what anybody says. Even if you have a sump pump, there's always moisture problems, and that's exactly what we've got going on here. So prior to us owning this house, the last owner had painted the basement floor. I don't know if you can see that. And we've used this a lot. We've had carpets over this, but the problem is whatever sealed up, there's always moisture coming out of the concrete. And so whatever sealed up, whether there was a Tupperware sitting on the floor or maybe not the carpet that would breathe properly, what would happen is it would flake up like this. You can see that we've got a lot of bubbles, and it just drives us crazy. And the kids use this space a lot. Emma's actually on holding the camera today, and she's going to help me with this project. So we decided there's a couple different solutions that you can go to. You can use an epoxy-based product that's a two-part epoxy dry lock system that they use, that you scrape all of this up, get it as clean as you can, put the two-part together and seal it back. That's supposed to be better. I just don't think any paint or sealer is really going to work with this. We don't have water in this basement, but there is moisture, and what happens is the moisture gets caught up under these spaces, and it bubbles up like that. So not only that, I've been working on the boat, which is a two-part epoxy, and I can't imagine doing 200 square feet of two-part epoxy at this point. So we've changed to what I think is an affordable approach. There's this system called Dricore. They have this at Home Depot, but it's a plywood, sealed plywood on the top, and on the bottom has this waffle look to it. And the way that this goes together, the idea is it's raised off of this moist floor, and it's designed so that the air can flow underneath it, continue to dry it out if moisture does build up underneath it, but also it should eliminate that. So we're going to go ahead and scrape the floor off. Then we're going to put this dry lock on as a subfloor. Sort of locks in like that, and then we've got this really inexpensive 2 foot by 2 foot carpet pad, which has some sticky back to it. So the idea is that we're just gonna put it on there, and then we'll have this nice dry floor that's ventilated. It was actually pretty affordable. We're gonna do this whole basement for just under $400, 200 square feet. That's pretty good. Under $1 a square foot to do the whole thing. So kind of excited about that. With any project, there's some unfun things that I've have to do some extra work on. So this right here, if you back up a little bit, Emma, this was a missing, broken piece of paneling. So I replaced it years ago with some whiteboard product, which has served us really well. But it's really starting to get beat up, and you can see that it's cracked and so forth. So unfortunately, I've got to take that off. I'm going to steal this from a different part of the basement that isn't completely paneled, so I have actually another piece that matches this. Eventually, we might clean this up and paint this. I know it's not very pretty, but it serves its purpose. So I'm going to replace this panel. The other thing I have to do is, you can see where all the dry erase marks were down here. I put this baseboard down about 10 years ago to clean it up with the intentions of painting. I never painted it. So what I have to do before I do this project, or before I put the Dricore system down, is pop off the baseboard, replace this paneling, put the Dricore in, and then put the baseboard back in. So one more thing, and I apologize, this video is going to take a little while, but I think there's going to be a lot of interest in this, so I want to make sure I'm as thorough as I can. Wanted to show you the tools that I'm going to use for this. So the Dricore can be cut. There's two options to be cut with. I'm going to use my circular saw. Got a old-fashioned square. I'm going to use the jigsaw if I have to do any corners. Those two 2x4s are actually, and hammers are actually for whacking or hitting the side of the Dricore. It's got a little channel lock in it, so we're going to knock it together. And then got some just normal pullers and pliers and bars and things like that. And then this is one of those super handy things I think everybody should have, just a little workbench that we can do everything on. And the last piece, which is not the fun part, is we've got a couple scrapers here that we'll use to scrape all this nasty stuff, and then we've got the dry vacuum cleaner. So step one, and if you see the rest of the basement, you'll see that, like everybody, we got too much stuff. So we've got everything that we use in this basement on one side. We're going to finish the floor on this side, bring all of that over, and then do the other side. So we'll do a little time lapse. We'll hopefully you'll enjoy and learn something out of this. I will learn something out of this because I've never done it before. So we'll see how it goes. Looking forward to it. One more thing I kind of buzzed over in the intro. This floor's been painted before, like I said, and it is bubbled in various places. I'm sure we could probably just throw the dry lock right back on top of it. Not the dry lock, but the Dricore on top of it. But I just feel it's kind of lazy, so we're going to scrape off the bubbles. We're not going to soap this down or try to, you know, make it, you know, just totally clear of paint. We're just going to scrape off the loose paint. Use the dry vacuum to suck up all of that loose paint, so at least we feel like it's a little bit neat. It may bubble up a little bit underneath there, which I don't think it'll be that big of a deal, but hopefully with this ventilation system, what's down will stay down. But we're going to do our best to sort of clean it up a little bit before we start rolling that floor down. Okay, that was funny. That is a perfect reason why to not stand on a stool. If you're wondering where I'm getting that paneling section from, if you come to this side of the basement, you'll see that outside in the stairway hall, there's one random piece of paneling. Now, I've kind of covered it up with trim over the years doing some other things, but I'm going to try to carefully remove this, cut it, and put it there. Okay, we've got the panel off. I thought it'd be fun to show you one quick tip that a lot of people don't think about. I'm cutting this panel. Probably the best way to do it would be on my table saw up in the garage, but then I'd have to drag it upstairs and I'd probably hit the wall and everything like that, which I usually do, and my wife will get mad at me. So I'm going to cut it here freehand with my circular saw. But before I do that, one of the things that you can do, a lot of times when you use a circular saw, if it's not a fine tooth blade or one that's super sharp, which mine isn't, I beat it up, the best thing to do is to stop the wood from tearing out. You see, like, who did this before has that tear out there. That's kind of a sloppy job. One of the ways they could have prevented that is by scoring the panel with a X-Acto knife. And the reason that is you've cut the fibers in the wood, you score it a really fine line so that when you use the saw and cut it, it will actually, it won't fray like this because you've already cut the fibers on the top of the panel. So I'm setting up my drywall square, which I use a lot because it's nice and straight. And then I'm just going to take this, and then with a firm pressure, I'm going to score it all the way down before I use my circular saw to cut it. And I'll show you the after it's been cut. Now, I'm in a basement. I'm doing this, you know, kind of quick. I'm not super careful about it. So I'm going to make the best cut I can with my circular saw. So it's not going to be perfect, but it should be pretty close. And doing this one tip should make it clean up a little bit. But one thing I wanted to show you before I cut this is it's best when you're using a tool like this to use the least amount of depth of the saw as possible. It's a safety thing, but it's also you'll get a better cut out of it, because why pass through this entire width of this blade when you only have to pass through this little bit? So that's why you sort of set it at the minimum depth you could possibly do. You know, a little bit beyond. This is 1/4 inch thick, so I'll do, you know, like 3/8 of an inch or something like that. But there's always a little bit of method to my madness that I often forget to explain as I'm going through these things. So there's typically some little tricks that carpenters will do that you won't think about. But that's why I'm doing it this way. So here we go. Okay, so we've cut the panel. There was one more thing. There's always something I think of as I'm doing this, and another tool yet I need. So I've got a block plane, and I've got sandpaper. What is a good tip, if you're cutting stuff by hand, you can't really tell here, but what I've tried to do, and again, it's a basement, I'm doing this quick, is you actually draw the line and cut a little bit off the line, and then you can go back and use your hand plane or your sandpaper to sand up to the line. You'll get a much better finish that way. I kind of, like I said, I kind of ripped through this pretty quick here. So it's okay. I'm just, like I said, I don't want to keep making excuses for myself, but I'm doing a quick basement job here on this panel. So, and if you look at the rest of the basement, it's not the end of the world. So now what I can do is my line is made there. As if I adjust my plane here properly, I can now plane down to that straight line, and you'll get a pretty darn close straight line by doing it this way. And it seems like it's a little tedious and going faster, but it really doesn't take that long. And then you'll go ahead and just finish it up with a sand block, and you'll be in pretty good shape. So let's see if it fits. I got to do a little bit more trimming, but I think you would agree that for some scrap piece of panel that was in, we're going to be in pretty good shape. Okay, so we've got the panel in. I'm pretty happy with that. That came out pretty good for some scrap material, stealing it from another section of the basement, but it looks consistent. There's a little bit of dry erase residue here that I'm going to have to try to figure out how to take off, but that's okay. But anyway, I put a little trim piece here. Now we're doing on the floor. So this, again, is the Dricore product. Strived a little bit. When I went to Home Depot, they didn't have instructions on this or anything. I'm sure the best thing to do would be to go online and look at the installation guides and everything like that, but I think it's pretty straightforward. I haven't put this type of system in, but I've put a lot of other floor systems in, including a sleeper floor and top of concrete, which was a built-up pressure-treated 2x4 system that we put a floor on. So it's not going to be very much different. One of the things that most flooring systems this should be pretty stable product, but again, we're in a moist area. So one of the things that is usually a good idea to do, depending on how damp the basement is, and again, we're on a moist floor, is just like any sort of laminate or composite floor system, you would gap it. So you'd put a little bit of expansion and contraction gap on it. I'm going to try to do that. I actually am going to use, where are my tools here? So I'm just going to use right here to try to space it off a little bit. So then that way, if the floor does expand and contract, and I'm sure it will, then we'll be able to, oh, I actually got a scrap piece of the paneling that I can use. Then we won't have to worry about it buckling or lifting in any places. So that's probably a pretty important thing to do. Again, I don't have the product instructions, but be foolish not to. So we're going to start putting these into place. How this works is you'll see this has a little channel on it and a little V-groove. And so basically I'm putting the V-groove, the lack of the V-groove in the corner, and then I'm going to slide it all together here. Ooh, good, we lucked out. It went under that heater. I was worried about that. So basically what we do is I've got a block here. Very simply, take a just scrap piece of 2x4, and we're going to tap it into place. until it fits tight. That's it. No glue required or anything. And we're just going to go around and we'll put the tile laps on and we'll knock that all together. And then the next step after that is we're going to have to put the carpet down. Now, there's a couple things you'll see me do in the time lapse is I don't know exactly how square the walls are on this basement. So I'm going to start in the corner that's closest to the entry door because I think that's where, you know, I'd rather make less cuts during the entry. And then we're just going to lay the pattern out across the floor, but you'll see me using various tools here to get around some things, the heaters, the door openings, and things like that. And I'm going to use the circular saw and the jigsaw to go ahead and trim that. So it won't go as quick as I'd like it to, where you just throw it down and you're done, but we'll see. So anyway, we'll put it on time lapse and you can see how we do. Got the corner. We've come up to the first area where we need to do some cutting, and there's going to be a lot of cutting because it's going to run all the way along this wall. But the first thing that we're going to have to do is worry about this trim area. And so what a lot of folks, I don't know, I've done a lot of floors, so maybe this isn't as big of a question as other people, but often people wonder, what do you do when you get around floors or doorways rather? So I've gotten my tool. I'm going to cut this board first, but I'll describe it before we... One of my favorite tools, and you can do this with a handsaw, but one of my favorite tools has become this fine tool. They're just awesome. This is not a very expensive one, but one way to do it without taking the baseboard off or anything like that is you can just simply get the product that you're doing. I'm probably going to get a piece of the carpet here too, and just edge it. And so if we're going to take this little clip here off, you got this little stop molding here. You're just going to take the fine tool, run it onto the surface, and then zip it. And then you'll see it'll just pop right underneath it. Okay, so I think I've decided I'm going to bring it to this door stop here. And then I'll do the transition strip right in this little area so it doesn't stick into the basement. There's really sort of no technical way of doing this. It's just sort of, you know, what you think is the best solution at the time. So what I'm going to do is mark some of this stuff, and I'm going to show you how I'm going to cut this piece. So basically it's kind of a tricky piece. I'm going to go into this corner, I'm going to wrap around the corner and then wrap around the door and then stop right there. So there's a lot to it. So the first thing I'm going to do is this. I've decided I'm not going to cut the whole jamb off. I just don't think it's necessary. I'd like to do less cutting than I need to do to especially keep the dust down in here. So that's going to be where I'm going to stop and transition it. Now, how do we go about figuring out the depth of this stuff? Remember, this is the end of this piece, so we're going to have to telegraph some lines here to be able to get to where I need to be. So assuming that that panel is flush with this doorway, what I'm going to do is I got to sort of think about the negative space here. I used to do some architecture design work, so negative space is kind of an architecture word. So again, remember, I'm going to leave the 1/4 inch of space here. We might finagle it, so I'm gonna cut out the negative space is the area that I'm going to actually cut out, right? So we're figuring that if we draw this line across here, the whole piece is going to be, I'm using the square edge of the tool. Sorry, my hand's in the way. So there's my cut line. I'm having trouble keeping that in one spot there. Thank you, Emma. Oh, it's always good to have an extra hand. So there's my cut line. That'll be that. That'll be that cut line, and then we're gonna have where it goes up in the panel. So I've marked it exactly, and then I don't need to be exact here because it's just the corner of the room here, but I'm gonna mark this off as this line. And then I'm going to take a measurement here. I could use my square, might as well. So I'm gonna go to, again, giving myself a little bit of space here to make it, let's see, let's space that off of that corner like that. And so that makes me here. So I'm about 11 3/8. Let's do 11 3/8 right there. I'm just going to draw a pencil line on there. I'm going to bring that 11 3/8 to my other line here. You see how this gets a little crazy here? That's not going to make sense till we put it all together. So there's my 11 3/8 line. So you'll see it stops there, and then we'll flip this over because we want to keep this as square as possible. I'm going to use the square edge on the outside of the plywood, and I'm going to cut this here. So if I've done it right, the area that we're cutting out is going to be this piece here, and then we're going to cut this whole thing here off, okay? See if that works out. So I'll pull it up. I'm going to use the combination of the circular saw and the jigsaw here for this job. Should probably get some clamps. That will make my life a little easier, but okay, I fought my laziness here, and I'm got a straight edge. That's what this piece is going to be used for. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to clamp this not only to the table, but I'm also going to clamp it to my straight edge. And so you'll see on the tool here the distance, what you're doing, the distance from here to the blade is 5 inches. I don't necessarily like that tape measure as much, so I'm gonna double check it with this. That one's hard to read too. So where'd my other square edge go? Okay. So essentially what I'm doing is I'm making, if you measure the cut line, it's exactly 5 inches. I'm glad I did that because it was showing a little bit more than 5 inches. So what I'm going to do is I want to cut this line. Can you see that? Look, don't look at me, look at the camera. I mean the line. So I want to cut this line. So basically what I'm doing is I'm measuring with my clamps. I'm going to go to 5 inches. I'm going to bring my straight edge down to that line. Too much stuff always all over the place. So there's my 5-inch line. So the first thing we'll do is clamp that like that. It's not, I'm just going to tap it a little bit. There we go, on the 5-inch line. Then we're going to do the same thing on this side, on that 5-inch line. Then we're going to clamp this sucker. Okay, that's it. So let me just double check it. So center of the line is at 5 inches. Center of the line is at 5 inches. Beautiful thing. So now we're going to get back to my saw here. And we always double check everything. So I've got to reset the depth of the blade here to make sure, again, like we talked about before, where it's just enough but not too much. So that looks about right there. Okay, and now if I've got this set up right, it's right where I want the cut line to be, and then I'm going to use this as my straight edge, and it will be just as straight as if I used a table saw or something like that to cut it. So here we go. My blade wasn't deep enough. You see that? So I'm gonna, next time I do that, I need to make the blade a little bit deeper. Okay, but for, you can just cut this like that. Okay, so now there's that cut that we made. That's going to be the transition strip for this. We're going to have another block in the doorway. And now let's look at, there's my cut line here, right? So I'm going to do, I can probably get the jigsaw out for this one. Actually, let me do this. So, I'm going to cut it with this. Because this is, I'm not meeting this with any other piece. It doesn't have to be perfect. One of the things I don't like about the jigsaw, which I'll describe in a minute when I get it, is the cut kind of gives me an angle sometimes because the blades aren't that stiff. So if I want to get a more of a square cut, I can do it actually better with the skill saw. One of the things I'd love to get is a mini skill saw. So let's cut this one. I always try to be careful, make sure I don't pick the blade up until after. Emma, if you can get on this side so they can see it cut. A couple of things I'm doing too is don't forget that the blade is round, right? So you can't cut past the line. You could, I guess, because this is a subfloor, but that's kind of messy. And so what's going to happen is I'm going to cut up just to the line. And then I'll have to go back with either a handsaw or the jigsaw to clean up the corner. So let me just cut this one. You want to go from this side? And you'll see where I'm cutting. Some of the newer circular saws have a stop, so that stops quickly. Mine doesn't, but it works. Alright, so now I'm going to get the jigsaw. And I'm going to finish it up because we still got this little half round section. Try not to cut my cord here. There we go. There's our cut. Now, here's the test here. Did I cut it just how we wanted to cut it? So we've got two things to do here, remember? We've got to make sure that we have... Let me give it a little scrap of that floor. There was a reason why I wanted to wait for this scrap. And I'll show you what that is. So, see that? I saved that piece so that I could go back and cut this little strip here, right? So I actually want to cut it a little bit higher because I want the carpet to go under there as well. So, I'll put the carpet on here. I'll actually just do it on the smoother side so we can do it a little easier, right? So all I got here is the carpet. This up to here. That's my height. That's my line, right? So now it's just as simple as getting this guy. Didn't quite go as deep as I wanted. You're seeing it's smoking because my blade is terribly dull. So,
okay.
There's my piece. So I'm going to do the same thing here. I don't know, this is kind of a tight corner here, so we'll see how we do. So I'm going to do the same thing here. Okay, so that's as simple as that. Did I get this in long enough? Probably not. I'm trying to, I don't want to just jam it in there because I don't want to hit this paneling on the back side. Oh, let me do that again. Did I get it? There it is. All right, so now let's not forget, we need to get the vacuum. So let's do that, because if we don't vacuum it up, it's going to be a mess. Underneath that floor, we might get sweeps on it, and oh boy, why am I always tangled in cords? All right. Sorry. Okay. All right, where's my cut piece that we did, Emma? Oh, you're standing on it.
Oh.
Okay. Now, let's see how we did here. I'm getting this spacer, so I can keep the spacer here. Hang on, let's shift it up a little bit. There we go. Okay. Remember that spacer is for expansion and contraction. Let's get my small block and my hammer. It's on the floor right there. So what we're gonna do is, we'll see if this fits. So we're gonna tappy, tappy, tap. And we're gonna come back this side. Might have done it a little too tight here. Oh, it looks like it's gonna be okay. There we are. So I'm sure there's a mathematical way to figure that out, but that's how I'm doing it. And you can see it looks pretty good. I did a little less than 1/4 inch there intentionally because, you know, you want the expansion and contraction, but you also want to have a nice finish at the doors. So here's where we're at. So we're in really good shape. Looks good. Now you see how that so I'm going to use a cheap piece. I mean, this is obviously not the piece I'm going to use, but the idea is when I get a strip, and I might actually use a 2x4, look at that. Boom. So that strip will end, that transition strip will end right here. Kind of looking like that when I get to that point. That'll be the last thing I do. So now we've got to do the same thing on this side. This is going to be a little tricky because we've got 2 corners going on here. So look at that, there's a Lego. We've got two corners going on here. I won't bore you with the details of that. And then we're going to have to cut little strips like this all the way down that wall line so we get it. But that's how you get into a corner. Doorway. See ya. Okay, so I thought of one thing that I don't know if it's necessary since silly me doesn't have the product guide. You'll see that I've been putting together just like square pattern, kind of like a tile pattern. One of the rules when you're doing construction with plywood is you alternate the seams, and then that gives you more rigidity. So I've done this corner here. I'm not going to rip it out because I've gone up to the door and the door will lock it in, but I'm thinking as I move forward here, and this is only the first 2 sections, I'm going to start alternating the seams. So what that means is if you come over here, so I've got a seam here. This is our little piece. So instead of cutting a new little piece, I'm going to start going back with a, I got to think of which way I use these actually. They were in this direction. So I want to make sure that I have the seams right. So I'm going to start putting these in like this so that I'm actually alternating the seams. That'll give it more strength. And then I'm also thinking that if this thing expands and contracts and moves around a little bit, that we will actually we'll be a little bit stronger that way. So I'm gonna put in a full piece, run the whole length. I'll cut that piece on the other way, and then alternate it after that. So after lunch here, we'll set up time lapse, because I think now there's less cutting except for the end pieces, and we'll just go on until we need to move the furniture around. So just wanted to talk about that a little bit. Don't know if we need to do it, but definitely the general rule of construction to do it that way, so I'm going to go that way. Okay, we're back. We've done the entire room. If you could scan around and see how it all came out. So this is the carpeting. It's going to be a random pattern, random color. That's how it comes in the boxes. The floor, like I said before, I was a little bit off on my square footage. I think we're going to do this whole project for about $3 a square foot. So the dry lock is about $2 a square foot, and this material is about $1 a square foot. Actually, I think it's like 98 cents a square foot. So I think that's pretty great for just the basement floor. After looking at this for a little while, we've decided that it's important, and I just wanted to mention this in the video, to kind of lay it out a little bit. The colors are, you don't want two light colors next to each other. Also, we thought about the least amount of cutting. Obviously, we're going to have to cut the carpet with a straight knife, but I just tried to figure out the least amount. So I've got a pretty long run against this wall. So we decided to go with a full size there, and then we decided it would be neat or nice if we made the corner in solid sheets, so that we'll be cutting on this short wall. We're probably going to have to cut on this wall, but then we shouldn't have to cut. We're inevitably going to have to cut on one side or the other, but anyway, just think about it. See if you can reduce some of the effort with cutting. And the cutting's simply just going to be a razor knife and on top of a board with a straight edge, and that's it. So we'll do the time lapse now. I know I said that last time, but this is just wanted to go through a little bit of the thought process here. Okay. Okay, another successful projects with Petro. Emma, obviously you saw, was a absolute super help. I couldn't have done it without her. But I'm pretty happy with the results. What do you think, Em?
It's good.
I think it's very good. It feels much drier down here. I'm not showing you all the room because the other side of the room has all of the furniture still stuffed in the corner, but took us about 12 hours all the way through. So I'm really pleased, and I think it's a very good solution for a basement floor if you're going to finish it. Like I said, I'm not a super fan of finishing basements, but I like it. It's raised off the floor, has a nice ventilated space. This carpet, you can cover this with a lot of different things. There's laminates, there's floating floors that can go on this. This carpet we thought would be good for the basement, and was actually the most inexpensive way to go too. So anyway, very happy. Happy Easter to everybody. Hope you enjoyed it, and hopefully this will help you out a little bit. Goodbye.